Karen Grassle has finally revealed what happened on the day Michael Landon went too far on the set of Little House on the Prairie, a moment that left longtime fans stunned. For nearly half a century, viewers saw Karen Grassle and Michael Landon as the steady heart of the Ingalls family, their gentle scenes becoming a refuge for millions. Yet behind that warmth, Grassle carried private memories that never matched the picture on screen. She later admitted the shift began after she asked for fair pay. When Landon's jokes grew crude and increasingly humiliating, she kept working, kept smiling, and kept quiet, believing silence was the only way to survive a set controlled by a powerful star. While the world adored the Ingalls family, she endured a growing tension that few ever suspected. But now, at 82, Karen Grassle is finally ready to speak the truth, and the moment she describes changes everything we thought we knew. Long before Karen Grassle ever imagined telling her story, she stepped onto a set that felt like a dream. Little House on the Prairie was Michael Landon's vision, shaped by his energy, his talent, and his determination to build a show families could trust. Karen arrived as a trained stage actress, grateful for the chance to play Caroline Ingalls, a role she hoped would bring meaning rather than fame. In those early days, their partnership held genuine promise. She later described Landon as amazing and multi-talented, remembering the creativity that poured out of him as he wrote, directed, and starred in the series. The warmth America felt watching Charles and Caroline started as something real. At first, she believed they would build that world together. Yet inside that hopeful beginning lived a quieter truth. Landon carried a temperament she described as very highly strung, a tension that hovered beneath his charm. Still, the cast bonded quickly, and Karen poured herself into Caroline's steadiness, shaping a woman whose strength anchored the entire Ingalls family. As cameras rolled and episodes aired, audiences fell in love faster than anyone expected. The show became a phenomenon by its second season in 1975, changing the lives of every actor who stepped onto that dusty frontier set. Success, however, reshapes people in ways no one anticipates. With the show thriving, Karen realized her contract no longer reflected the work she delivered or the importance of her character. She was not seeking special treatment, nor trying to challenge Landon's authority. She was simply asking to be paid fairly. It was a reasonable request for any actor on a hit series, yet it became the moment their paths shifted. Her later reflections reveal that the atmosphere around her began to cool, quietly but unmistakably. What had once felt collaborative now carried an edge she could not ignore. The change was subtle at first. Karen sensed distance where warmth had been, strain where partnership once lived. It was the kind of shift a viewer would never detect because the cameras captured only the finished picture, gentle smiles, easy tenderness, the familiar marriage of Charles and Caroline. But away from the screen, Karen began to feel everything tightening. She was working beside a man admired by millions, a man guiding the creative direction of the show, and she was the actress trying to defend her worth in a time when women in the industry rarely felt secure doing so. The truth she later shared reveals something deeper than a contract dispute. This was not simply a disagreement over salary. It was the emotional weight of knowing her value yet fearing the cost of naming it. The television world of the 1970s was not kind to women who spoke up, and Karen understood the risks. She needed the job, she loved the work, and she loved Caroline, the character who had become a symbol of steadiness for families across the country. So she continued, even as the atmosphere around her shifted in ways she could not control. And while viewers saw a family growing stronger every season, Karen carried something far more complicated. She stayed dedicated, stayed professional, stayed silent. But the early fracture born the moment she asked for fairness never fully healed. It lingered beneath years of filmed dinners, porch conversations, and carefully crafted scenes of frontier harmony. What no one at home realized was that this quiet fracture would set the stage for the moment Karen Grassle now describes as the day Michael Landon went too far. That moment was still ahead of her, waiting in the shadows of everything she worked so hard to endure. The change Karen Grassle felt on set did not arrive with an argument or a single defining moment. It appeared in the small spaces where actors gather their breath between scenes, in the corners of conversations where something once warm now felt cool. Karen was sensitive to shifts in people, trained to read tone and subtlety from years of stage work. And slowly she sensed that Michael Landon's presence carried a different energy than before. The collaborative ease they once shared had thinned, replaced by something more unpredictable. For Karen, it felt as though the ground beneath her feet had begun to tilt, and she was trying to keep her balance without drawing attention to the effort. During these shifting months, Landon's humor changed as well. Karen later recalled that the jokes on set grew sharper and more explicit, especially the ones that involved women. There was a time when she brushed aside off-color remarks in the name of professionalism, assuming they were part of the environment she had entered. But these jokes carried a sting that left her feeling singled out rather than included. They were not warm, communal moments of cast camaraderie. They were reminders that she had less power in the room than the man delivering them. She felt herself responding not with anger, but with a kind of inward stillness. Karen described freezing internally, unable to push back in a setting where she knew the risks of speaking too directly. That internal freeze became a quiet act of protection. She relied on her training, her discipline, and her understanding of the industry in the 1970s, where a woman's reaction could determine whether she was welcome or replaceable. Karen did what many women in entertainment had to do at the time: remain composed while absorbing far more than she ever wanted to carry. What made this period so painful was not simply the crude humor, but the feeling of isolation that settled in its wake. Karen had joined the show to bring authenticity to Caroline Ingalls, hoping to portray a woman with quiet strength and emotional depth. Now she found herself channeling that strength off-screen as well, holding herself steady when the atmosphere around her no longer felt supportive. She was surrounded by castmates who loved the work as much as she did, yet the tension rested between her and the person who shaped the show's direction. That imbalance followed her through long production days filled with intricate scenes that demanded concentration and emotional availability. Still, she kept giving the audience everything she had. The bond between Caroline and Charles Ingalls remained tender, trusting, and full of devotion. Karen ensured that none of her private discomfort touched the character she played. Viewers saw a woman whose marriage was built on respect and mutual care, unaware that the actress portraying her was navigating a much more complicated dynamic behind the scenes. That separation between the world on camera and the world around it required enormous emotional labor, and Karen carried it quietly, believing that exposing her struggle would threaten the work she valued. As the seasons progressed, the imbalance she felt became harder to ignore. She was not looking for conflict. She was looking for safety, for steadiness, for the sense of partnership she once believed she had. But the growing discomfort cast a long shadow across her days, gathering strength in ways she did not fully recognize at the time. All of this created the emotional terrain that shaped what came next. The tension did not explode in an instant. It accumulated piece by piece until one moment rose above the rest. Karen Grassle did not yet know that this moment would follow her for decades. But the day she later described as the moment Michael Landon went too far was already forming in the quiet spaces where she felt increasingly unseen. There comes a moment, in every silent struggle, when the weight becomes unmistakable, when the heart finally admits what the mind has tried to ignore. For Karen Grassle, that moment arrived not with a dramatic outburst, but with a quiet realization that settled deep inside her. She had endured shifts in tone and jokes that cut rather than amused, but what stayed with her was the day she understood that the respect she once believed existed between her and Michael Landon had slipped away. It was an ordinary working day on a set she had come to know as well as her own home, yet something in the air told her that nothing about the atmosphere felt familiar anymore. Karen recalled that the humor on set, once spirited and warm, had taken on a sharper edge. She had spent months adjusting to Landon's increasingly explicit jokes, trying to shield herself behind professionalism while protecting her standing in a male-dominated industry. But on this particular day, the words he directed at her crossed an emotional boundary she had held tightly. The remarks were crude, pointed, and delivered with an ease that left her feeling exposed. They were not playful or harmless. They were reminders of the imbalance she faced, reminders that a person in power could change the tone of a room with a single choice. The moment did not erupt into confrontation. Karen did not raise her voice or confront Landon. Instead, she felt herself fall into that internal stillness she had described in later years, a freeze shaped by fear of consequence, and a lifetime of knowing how fragile a woman's place in the entertainment industry could be. She held herself steady because she had to. She held herself steady because any reaction might be misunderstood in ways she could not afford. She held herself steady because silence felt like the only fragile shield she still possessed. What marked this day as different was not the joke itself, but the recognition that followed. Karen realized she no longer felt protected by the partnership she had once trusted. The admiration she had carried for Landon early on had already begun to erode, but this moment revealed the depth of that loss. She understood, in a way she had not before, that the environment around her no longer offered safety or respect. Standing there in the middle of a familiar set, she felt a shift within herself that would not be undone. The day continued as usual for everyone else. Cameras rolled, scenes were completed, scripts were followed with the precision expected of a long-running series. But Karen carried something new in her chest as she moved through the hours. The gentle marriage of Charles and Caroline Ingalls remained intact on screen, the smiles and soft moments flowing with practiced ease. Yet behind those scenes, Karen walked through her work with a heaviness that settled into every step. She had reached a breaking point, one not visible to anyone except herself. This internal fracture shaped everything that came after. It changed the way she approached her scenes, the way she interacted behind the camera, and the way she saw the show that had once felt like a gift. She continued to give viewers the same steady presence they cherished, but her emotional world had divided into two pieces: the character she portrayed and the woman who felt increasingly unseen. Karen Grassle never framed this moment as a scandal. She spoke of it in later years with clarity and restraint, choosing honesty rather than dramatization. To her, the breaking point was not about a single sentence or a single gesture. It was about the recognition that the respect she needed was no longer there, and that she had been carrying the pain of that truth for far too long. This was the day she understood she was on her own. And it was this understanding more than anything else that shaped the long, quiet aftermath still ahead of her. After the breaking point settled inside her, Karen Grassle moved through the set of Little House on the Prairie with a different kind of awareness. Nothing in the daily routine had changed. Scripts still arrived on schedule, costumes hung waiting for their scenes, and the California sun still washed the set in the same warm light viewers imagined belonged to the Minnesota frontier. Yet for Karen, every step carried the memory of what she had realized. The partnership she once believed in was gone. The shift was invisible to anyone watching her work, but it shaped the emotional landscape of the years that followed. She continued delivering the steady, loving presence of Caroline Ingalls with remarkable discipline. To audiences across the country in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Caroline remained the quiet heart of the Ingalls family, a woman who stood strong through hardship and anchored her children with compassion. Karen protected that portrayal fiercely. She would not allow her personal hurt to stain the character who had become a symbol of stability for millions. This separation between her real world and the one on screen became both her shield and her burden. Behind the camera, the silence between her and Michael Landon grew wider. Landon remained a central creative force on the show. Admired for his talent and dedication, castmates would later describe him with affection, acknowledging his brilliance and intensity in their own memoirs. Their experiences were varied, but many remembered a leader who demanded excellence and worked tirelessly to maintain the show's vision. For Karen, however, the emotional distance made each professional interaction feel delicate. She respected the work, but the sense of safety she once felt around Landon had disappeared. She learned to navigate the set quietly, choosing her steps with care. Each day required focus, resilience, and a steady hold on her internal boundaries. She knew that speaking openly could jeopardize her place on a show that had become a cultural touchstone. She also understood the reality of the era. Women who voiced discomfort in the 1970s often faced consequences far sharper than the ones that created the discomfort. The unspoken rule was simple: endure, perform, and protect your position. Karen followed that rule because the work mattered to her, and the character she played mattered to the audience. As the seasons passed, the emotional distance settled into something permanent. It did not erupt into open conflict, and it never appeared in promotional interviews or behind-the-scenes footage. But Karen felt it every time she stepped onto the set. She had once believed she and Landon were building something meaningful together. Now she focused on preserving her own strength, creating a private space inside herself that no one on the set could touch. This quiet defense became the foundation that allowed her to continue. The public knew nothing of this inner battle. To families watching at home, the cast appeared united, their bonds unshakable. The weekly stories of hope, resilience, and frontier courage carried the same gentle tone the show had always promised. Viewers saw a marriage built on love and mutual respect, unaware that the actress portraying Caroline was carrying a private ache behind every tender line. Her professionalism ensured that the fracture never reached the audience, but the emotional toll became part of her history with the show. This silent fallout shaped how Karen remembered her years on Little House on the Prairie. She cherished many parts of the experience: the fans who connected with Caroline, the meaningful stories, the impact the show left on American television. But the emotional break with Landon cast a shadow she carried far beyond the final episode. It remained tucked inside her, unspoken, becoming part of the truth she would one day choose to share. And as time went on, that truth waited for its moment. It remained quiet but present, lingering at the edge of her memories until the day she finally decided it was time to speak. Time has a way of softening the edges of memory, but it also brings clarity. For Karen Grassle, the years after Little House on the Prairie offered space to breathe, to rebuild, and to understand the emotional weight she carried long after leaving the set. She built a life beyond the prairie, a life filled with theater work, advocacy, and the quiet routines that come with aging into oneself. Yet the experiences she held inside from her years working with Michael Landon did not disappear. They settled, layer by layer, becoming part of the history she rarely spoke aloud. It was only with age that Karen began to see those years, not through the fog of obligation and fear, but through the lens of truth. When she reached her early 80s, Karen faced a choice that many people encounter late in life: whether to carry a story forever or set it down. The story she carried was not one of scandal, but one of emotional endurance, disappointment, and the complex bond between two people who created something iconic together. In 2021, she released her memoir Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, and in doing so, she opened the door to memories she had kept private for decades. Writing became a way to reclaim the parts of herself that had gone quiet on the set, the parts that once froze under the weight of another person's power. With remarkable steadiness, Karen shared her experience of the shifting atmosphere around Michael Landon during the show's run. She described the coarse humor, the explicit remarks, and the emotional distance that shaped her later seasons on the series. She offered her truth without exaggeration, staying rooted in what she lived rather than what others imagined. Her goal was not to tear down Landon's legacy, it was to give shape to her own. For Karen, speaking openly at 82 was not about anger. It was about finally releasing what she had carried in silence for most of her adult life. Part of what makes her revelation so moving is its nuance. Karen also shared that she and Landon reconciled before his death in 1991. Years after the tension that had defined their working relationship, they found enough peace to mend what had broken between them. This detail reveals the fullness of her perspective. She remembered the hurt, but she also honored the humanity of the man she once admired. She acknowledged his brilliance, the pressure he carried as a star and producer, and the many episodes of heartfelt storytelling he brought into the world. Her truth lived beside her forgiveness, and together they created a more complete picture of their shared past. By speaking at 82, Karen allowed herself the freedom to step out from behind the image of Caroline Ingalls and show the woman who had shaped her. She had spent much of her life protecting viewers from the painful parts of her journey, believing that the show's legacy mattered too much to tarnish. But age brought courage. Age brought understanding. Age brought the knowledge that her story too held value. Her revelation does not rewrite the history of Little House on the Prairie, it deepens it. It reminds us that the stories we cherish often come from people carrying burdens we never saw. It shows that truth can live quietly for years before finding its voice. And it reveals that even beloved figures like Michael Landon were complex, capable of great good and profoundly imperfect. By speaking now, Karen Grassle gives her audience something she never allowed herself in the 1970s. Her unfiltered, unhidden truth. And in telling it, she finally steps into the light of her own story, no longer shaped by silence but by the strength she found in facing the past as it truly was. Karen Grassle's revelation at 82 invites us to look at Little House on the Prairie with a wider lens, one that holds both the comfort the series offered and the private struggles that shaped it. The bond between Caroline and Charles Ingalls felt unbreakable on screen, yet behind that cherished image lived a story Karen carried alone for many years. By sharing her truth, she reminds us that even the most beloved productions are created by people navigating pressures, disappointments, and the quiet work of protecting themselves while giving their best to the world. Her decision to speak was not an act of anger, but an act of release. Karen chose to reclaim her story, while still acknowledging the reconciliation she reached with Michael Landon before his passing. Her honesty deepens the legacy of the show, and allows her journey to stand in full light at last. For more emotional stories, check out this video.